And I'll let Jennifer go ahead and uh, introduce our speaker this week.
Great, thank you. So we're excited to have Keith with us today. We've been showing you for, several months now, a lot who are kind of in the earlier stages of that transitioning into soil health practices. So we're taking you a long ways back today with Keith Thompson. He's been in a no-till system since 1991, and then, incorporating the other components of soil health practices pretty early on. So we have with us one of the early adopters today to share some about his story. When I've been talking with Keith and we do things, I think what's interesting and stands out to me is that he hasn't quit having that excitement to learn from others, see what they're doing, see what he can do. Just because you're on that leading edge doesn't mean they're not looking and finding other ways to continue to improve what they're doing and learning from others who are at all stages. So Keith is in Osage City, so kind of east central part of the state. So not only do we have him talking today, I'll highlight we're doing a field day at his farm a week from today on Wednesday, September 4th from 9 to 1. So any of you in the vicinity or anyone who wants to travel in, take a look. If you go to notill.org, there's a link on their homepage to the event, and it has a registration link. So walk-ins are always welcome, but it's great to have some registrations because that way we get a better idea for that food head count, which I think is due in a day or two. So if you think you'd like to join us next week, I'll encourage you to get registered just as soon as possible to help us with planning. So with that, Keith, if you're ready to go, I'll let you get started and I'll hand it over to you.
You want my video on?
I think that'd be nice if you're willing to.
Yep, I'll do it. Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. Like Jennifer mentioned right off, 1991 was the year I quit tilling. I'd tried no-till off and on from, I think, about 1974. Played with it a long time, had lots of problems. Didn't need to go that. I was in a full tillage thing. But one of the things I remember hating about tilling was when the dirt started blowing, my job was to get it on the open station, Oliver 77, and go around and scratch around and keep it from blowing. And you all know how that works, not at all. And one of the two reasons I quit, I wanted to do no-till, was to stop the erosion I was seeing and hopefully control wild cane. And I'm real good friends with Bud Davis, and he's hounded me for years about how bad of a job I was doing farming. And I told him, well, I wasn't doing a bad job. I read in the magazines all the time that how we farmed was absolutely perfect. And come to kind of find out, you can't believe everything you read. I think it was about 1997, No Till Plains had a tour invited. Carlos Coveto was from Chile, was here in the United States. He came visited my farm, and I was like pretty excited because Carlos was kind of a big deal. One of the original 5 no-tillers in South America. And I remember he walked out in my field, and I was like, real excited. Thought I was really doing something. And he walked around, and he stood there, and he looked, and he said, that's really nice, but where's the residue? And he said that, I remember him saying that, with the soil without any residue, just got hot. There's nothing to keep the soil in place. He said, without the residue, the soil's sick. And I didn't even know it at the time, but that was kind of like my first introduction to something that we now call soil health. Carlos was onto that back then. And that was kind of our group was myself, our first introduction to thinking about soil something rather than just a medium to grow crops on. And so in 98, the No Till Plains put a trip together and went down to South America and saw Carlos's farm and what he had done. And It's just like today when you visit a farm, you know, the seeing it in practice is really an eye opener. And then the next year, I'd been on the first No-Till on the Plains bus tour trip up to Dr. Dwayne Beck's farm. I think I was about 96, not sure positive all this. And got to be good friends with Dr. Beck, and he was also friends with the late Matt Hagney. And he told Matt that we all needed to get down to South America and study no-till and long-term breaks that they were doing down there. So they were like 15 years ahead of us. And so we went down there. I was with my son, Doug Paulin, and Matt Hagney. And we studied. One of the things that I think got me was how much they use livestock in their no-till systems. And also was my first introductions to covers and seeing how the rotation of perennial pastures and back to crops worked. So that was, you know, I really enjoyed that whole deal. Jennifer, there might be a picture you could put up. Do you want to do that now or later? We didn't get time to talk about this because of my computer problems. I had a picture of one of the places in Paraguay we visited.
Yeah, if you are interested in doing that, towards the top right on your screen, there's a little button that says share. And you should have access to be able to do that.
I honestly do not see that button.
Oh, all right.
Maybe it's someplace else. Let me check the buttons. If we don't, we won't get to see pictures.
Sure, or if you're able to text them to me or send them in an email, then I can bring them up over on my end. But
yeah, I thought I sent you an email last night, but maybe it didn't go through.
I'll look for that while you keep speaking. I'll take a look for that. How's that?
Okay. You bet. I've got to write. Like we said, I ran out of little trouble this morning getting going. And what they were really doing with these long-term breaks, they were using a perennial pasture system to control the weeds. And I remember I was in the pasture and it was full of thistles. And I told the gentleman, said, man, back in Kansas, we get in a lot of trouble having that many thistles. I said, what are you going to spray them with? And he's looked at me like he was dumbfounded. And he said, spray them? He said, this will go to soybeans next year. Those thistles will disappear. And what their long-term breaks was doing was they'd have pastures, and there was a diverse pasture. I think there was like 15 different things in this mix. I remember the alfalfa and clovers, they plant that, and that was their key, that when the alfalfa and clover had kind of disappeared out of the pasture, and that's when they knew it was about time to go back to a 4 or 5 year of crops. And they had all different kinds of rotations. We won't go into that. It was just interesting. And the long-term breaks was just a long time. And they used that pasture to get rid of weeds that bothered them in the crop ground. And they plant crops, and when the weeds in the crop ground got bad, they'd go back to this perennial pasture. It was a back and forth. It took about 4 or 5 years. And anyways, we got back from that, and my son, that was in 2000. My son we had a flood in 99. He was real upset about how it was washing. He decided we was going to, from what we saw down South America, we would use cover crops to control erosion along the creeks. And because was tired of it, and that slowly we moved that. And so one of the things we noticed about doing this, not only did it control the erosion, but in eastern Kansas in the spring, you know, it rains for us a lot. And we was able to plant quicker than I had when I wasn't using covers. And that was one of the things back early in the no-till, and I think still today people still probably complain about they can't get in quite as good, ground doesn't dry out as fast. And when you use a cover, when you get plenty of rainfall, and even if you don't get a lot of rainfall, I got friends out in Colorado, which we'll call West, that are learning how to use covers. And they just learn to have terminate them quicker than I do. I use them. I leave them long enough to pull the moisture out of the ground so I can plant. And then another trip I took to South America. I see a theme here. I went to South America a lot. It was pretty. I had a lot of friends down there, and or made a lot of friends. In 2002, my good friend Doug Paul and I, we visited South America. We was there for 3 weeks. Saw all types of cover mixes being studied, many various rotations. Was in Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina. We attended the Opera Seed Conference, which is much like the No-Till on the Plains Conference. And our host, Rolf Derps, we was with him most of the time, introduced us to all types of farmers and researchers. And we invited quite a few of these people up to speak at our conference here in the United States. Ademir Karagari, I don't know if you guys remember him, 2006, caused quite a stir about what they were doing with covers and diverse mixes, and got that started here. Had Carlos Quevedo speak at the conference, and Rolf Derps, and there was many other fellows. And I remember another concern we had when we got started was getting good seed, good stands. And so over the years, I worked pretty hard, come up with ideas, ways, because that was the reason it took me from 74 to 91 before I started, because I just couldn't get consistent stands. And that was the thing that was made it tough. And one of the ideas of my friend Matt Hagney and I, we talked about, and he came up with the ideas of the 4 rules of seeding, he called them. He called, you got to cut the residue, you got to place the seed, you got to firm the seed into the soil, and you got to close the seed trench. And all this was some ideas from the ARS that was doing studies on this. And it was out there, they'd seen that if you when you close the seed trench, if you have loose soil over it, you actually got better germination and stands. And that was one of the things we seen. And from all this was, if you want to look around, you can see that's basically what a good seeder needs to do when you're talking to people. Is those are the 4 things a seeder's got to do. And engineers, if they've designed the planter, drills, whatever you use, and work really good. Another thing I used early on in our CS, I enrolled in a CSB for 1 round, and we used some of that money to. I remember covers, and I can't remember. There's like 4 different programs we used on that. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't sign up after that because I was already doing all the things that I could sign up for, so I couldn't get paid. So I just didn't do it. I know one of the things I want to use program for now is I want to use it to build pollinator strips. That's one of the things I was up. Matter of fact, I was just up in North Dakota. My friends Kelly and Deanne Lewinsky visited their farms, and I saw what the buffer strips or pollinator strips they had. I thought, man, that looks like that would work really, really good. And it just wasn't. We went when we was traveling, watch YouTubes, go to conferences, farm visits, phone conversations. All those things are the little things you do that I noticed other farmers do the same thing. That's how you really learn. All those are important. It's not just one thing, is what I'm going to say. Our farm, we've got in more diverse rotations. That's still a work in progress. There's really no perfect rotation. Every year is different, and have found we got to, like in midstream, literally that day, we've changed our mind because something's happened, and okay, that we had a great idea, it wasn't going to work, we do something else. And another thing that happened on our farm, I never had livestock my whole life, and my son got all excited about what we were seeing down in Argentina. I mentioned about this livestock thing they was doing, and they got a cow-calf operation going. And I remember telling him, I said, I'm good with livestock, but we aren't going to do it like they do it in the States. I liked what they were doing down there. It was a little different thinking. And so that's what we did. One of the things I did notice from livestock, and because if you've never been around livestock, you think they're ruining the farm, and he grazed a cover crop. And over the years, I noticed that wherever he grazed, that field did invariably produce one of the best or as good a crop that's ever planted. So I never did really see a problem with livestock. I was really careful, getting them on and off the ground when you could. So that's been a big deal for us. As a matter of fact, we trying to start to do some of this perennial pasture back and forth. And the first one I did, my son told me, I was going to leave this in pasture because I need the pasture. We don't need the farm ground. So been doing that. I've been slowly cutting back on fertility. I haven't used it, I'm going to say none, because I put a little P and K in row when I plant corn or milo, but I haven't been putting any P or K on since 2017, and I haven't seen any detriment to my yields. Not saying I won't. Keep a watch on that. I've cut back on nitrogen use. This year we're at 50% what I was in, let's say 50% of what is considered you should be using. That's how I'm going to tell you. So whatever is the common deal. Another thing, over the years, we've been trying different biological products and ideas. I said one of the things I found that really helps us in this climate is having a in-row starter in our milo and corn. And I'm still playing with that one. This year we've been putting biologicals with it and seem to help. This was an odd year because normally I try to get what nitrogen I'm going to put on early. And I don't go through the long story what happened, but it was 6 weeks after the milo came up before I started putting my fertility on, or my nitrogen. And since it was 6 weeks, and I already decided to cut back, I cut back even more. And because the milo looked so good, it was unbelievable how great this milo looked with all I had to put the starter on. And it was about like 5 gallons with some biologicals in it. And so I'm trying to okay, there's something going on here. We cut back. I got as really good looking milo. And so basically after I planted this first milo, it got rained out. Like I said, it was 6 weeks before I got it on. We got some more milo planted. I waited until it was about 4 or 5 inches tall before I put the last of the fertilizer on, of nitrogen. I'm thinking it had some carbon source with it, had some sulfur. So it wasn't just pure N. And the big game changer we did this year is we put it in the ground. I've always just spread it over the row when I was planting, and I was getting too much nitrogen loss. Cover crops was a big game changer on our farm. You don't see the improvements, right off. Sometimes it takes 2 years to see what you did the year before. We've been planting what is now called green since 2000. I've always done that. And then the last few years, when I was planting green, there were some other people doing this. They were waiting till the beans came up before they killed the cover. And the longest I've waited is 4 weeks after the beans were up. And I can honestly tell you that I have seen no yield loss. And because we started doing this is our 4th year of doing this, we've quit using a residual on our beans and just use the cover, terminate it. Some years, some fields, we don't even have to go back and spray it again. And if we do, we just use, I'm not knowing some places people don't like this, but I use a lighter rate Roundup, Liberty, and an Enlist product. Just tell you what we do, but no residuals. The reason I went to that is because I want to be ability to me seems more important to plant a very diverse cover crop. And if you use any kind of residual, what we've found is your hands are tied behind your back, what you can plant and what you can grow. So that's the reason we've moved to that system on our bean fields. The milo and corn, I still am using the residual. This was basically as you well know, on milo, you can't, there's nothing on milo you can do because it's definitely one of the few crops that don't have any genetics to it for using other chemicals, which I am more than fine with. I'm actually really happy we don't have that ability. On corn, I've done the same thing. I just use, if we got a good cover growing, plant the corn, terminate the cover that day. We don't let that live. And then we have actually, over the years, I would say 80% of the time don't ever have to come back and spray again, which is really cool. And that also has helped us have ability to have more diverse cover crops, more kinds of different things you can plant. I'm not going to tell you what I plant for covers because it all depends on what we want to do for the field for the next year. One thing we've been doing the last 2 years is we've been planting it's about a 6-way mix. It has vetch and I want to say some clover and some grasses in it. And you would think my plan would be to plant corn and milo, but we use soybeans to plant into, and then the reason we do that, we have some oats in there. And the reason we've done that is we have seen that you don't see a benefit to the cover, that particular cover, the next year. It's 2 years later before we see that benefit. And so we're actually planning ahead, planting beans into a crop that you think would be a nitrogen fixation type cover crop, because to help it for the next year. I don't have enough data, time, and all that. I'm just telling you, from what I'm seeing, it looks like it's going to work. The biological system I've settled on here is is called IMOS, Indigenous Microbiology Organism System, that the Lewinsky's have come up with. And it's based off Korean natural farming ideas, if you want to look that up. The way they do it, the way the Korean thing is, it's kind of the same, but not. So I'm on a group chat with the IMOS bunch, and the No-Till on the Plains stopped at the Menoken farm this year, and Kelly posted a picture of this compost pile that Jay Thorner and his group up there said. I got pictures. We'll get to it when we get done. Big long concrete thing with these compost, and they planted living plants in it, and they fixed it up so they can catch the extract at the bottom of this. Looked like it was like maybe 100 and some feet long. When I saw that picture, I was pretty excited because I thought that is really cool, because here's you got this huge compost pile that you can keep going. You got living plants on it. You're getting your root exudates, you're getting all the things, and they're catching it down at the end in this big tank, and they're using it. I think they just built it this year. It's a keen idea. We're talking about ideas that I'm just looking at, and other people. Another thing that Kelly, I forget where he was at, was talking to, and you learn something new every day, but he's using it. Willows grow in a very tough environment, and he's using the leaves of a willow extract in with his IMOS, treating his seed to see how it enhances germination and growth. And this is something like literally in the last 3 or 4 weeks that he started this. And so I knew about the willow thing quite a while back, but he's actually doing some tests. And another one I was on some of you might have been on this. Russell Hedrick had a meeting yesterday on micronutrients, and I'm not going to go quite it, but they're using AI and tissue testing to decide what the plant needs, which I think is another really cool idea to bring more money to the farm. So at this time, I'm kind of done with my long-winded talk. So if anybody's got questions, and Jennifer, if you got those pictures, we could go through those.
So I don't see the pictures. If you want to take a peek and see if it's maybe still in your sent box, or if you're able to resend them while we work through questions. I don't want to make you multitask too much, but I'd love to be able to pop them up because that does sound interesting.
Yeah, let me see why that's. I just love computers. Sometimes they don't do what you tell them. I actually saw that email go out. And I actually do not see that you got it. So my computer pretended to send you pictures. Told me it did, and I didn't double check. That's my fault. Let's
Keith,
see if I can figure out some way.
Now, I don't know if you're using the app or you're just in Teams via in the browser, but I don't know if you can see the chat, but I posted a screenshot of where that share button is. At least that's where it shows up on mine. So it's like right up by the leave button at the top. If you go right to the left, there's a share with an arrow. I didn't know if that shows up on your end and you can share a screen.
Honestly, I am not. Oh, I see. Share photo. I wonder if I can find it on this computer. Let me see. Oh, don't do that. Oh. Share video, share photo. I'm not sure how I can get to my pictures. I'm because my pictures would be in a Google file. And I know trying to send this to you again, Jennifer, is not going to work because it was too big of a file to send.
I see.
And I apologize for all this. I thought I had this under control. It was a nice little PowerPoint presentation. It was only 5 pictures. I'll tell you what the pictures were. You can pretend in your mind you can see them. One was in Paraguay. We stopped at one. Rolf took us to a farm, and their group had a building they met. Their no-till group just had a place they just met all the time and discussed ideas. The other picture showed cover crops being rolled, and they were using, it tickled me, they had like 10-foot poles stuck in the ground, and at each end of the field and in the middle of the field, and the guy pulling the roller, that's what he used to make his pass across the field. And I got a picture of the roller, which was kind of a neat thing to see. I'd never seen anything like it. And that was 2002. That was the first time I'd ever seen one in action. That's for sure. And the cover crop was taller than I was. It was black oats and some broadleaves. There was like 5 or 6 things in this huge mat of stuff. And they would plant into it like literally they'd roll it and plant it the same day. That was kind of fun to watch. I'm trying to think what my other pictures were. I had a picture of the Imos brewer, which is basically a 50-gallon trash can with an aerator system in it. And then what I do is I go and I collect soil from, I try to get it out of native prairie, places that don't look like they've ever been disturbed, uh, wet spots on the farm. Mix them all together. Let's put some rolled oats and some other stuff in it. Get a really good, for 10 days, you water it and keep it in a dark place. A lot of fungus gets growing. That was one of the pictures showed how much the fungus was on there. Then you take part of this and put it in a mesh bag and put it in a brewer and you bubble it for 24 hours. And then you just put this product that's an extract right on your seed. And it'll stay viable for 6 weeks, which just makes it kind of neat. So you can treat your seed. And I'm not using it on my milo or corn, just soybean, wheat, anything that doesn't have a seed treatment on it, because the seed treatment would kill the microbiology. And then one picture of the brewer in action showing how when it gets going, it wants to bubble, even though the lid, it wants to come out of the lid. It's kind of and it smells good. It smells like, and you all know when you dig in the soil, and it's a good, healthy soil, and you take the shovel and you dig it up, you smell it, and it has that super earthy smell of life. And that's what this Imos brewer smells like. It just smells full of life. And the whole idea is to bring biology right to that seed, so when it germinates and gets going, guys has ever seen Dr. James White's talks on how the bacteria move in the plant and through the plants. This is to get the plant up and running faster, just like a natural fertilizer. Any other questions? I'm yapping away here.
See if anyone has anything for the chat, or you can just hop on and ask. If no one does, Keith, can you tell us a little more about your livestock operation? You said if you were going to bring them on, you were going to do it kind of a little different, not the traditional way. So how is it that what are the livestock doing when you're incorporating them into the crop ground?
Well, right off the bat is that a lot of people around here bring their cows into what they call a dry lot, which is, I don't know why that's given that name, because it's in the winter, it's anything but dry. And they have to feed them all the time, and they're messing with them. And I'd watch people do this and think that was crazy. And in South America, what they were doing, they had them in fields and they never put them in a dry lot. They weren't even really feeding cattle out. I'm not saying, I don't know what they're doing now. This was back then. They weren't putting cattle, finishing them off is what we would call it. So they just had them being grass fed. That'd be how they fed all their cattle. And not a lot of fooling around. So my son, when he started his cow-calf operation, we don't ever put them in a pen. We usually try to set up one of the farms with a cover crop and have the cows calve on that cover. And then if we're going to do that, that field will become a soybean field, because it's one of the last things we plant. And my son will tell you that since we started doing this and not keeping them confined, I guess that's what I didn't like, was the confinement of the cattle, and having to feed them all day, all the time. Although that we have found out that we still sometimes he has to go out there, and when, there are times during the year, and he'll tell you that you have to feed them, because the quality even of the cover crop isn't enough to sustain a mother cow in the spring. And so he's got this system he's worked out that he enrolls hay, and he enrolls, he puts out what some people are actually say he's wasting hay, but he puts plenty out there for them to eat, to lay on. And then when we plant in that later, what's always interesting is you can see where he unrolled the hay because of the extra organic matter of that hay. In other words, he probably put out enough that they can't eat it all because we want it to feed the soil. So we're, in a sense, wasting it. Some people would say, but I'd say we're not. Because over the years, we can see where he's done this over the years. That's, I think, the important part. I think this whole thing is a lot of people expect an instant gratification, and it takes time. That's one of the things in South America that I learned is they had year 1, you'd see this, in year 5, you'd see this, in year 10, you'd see this, in year 15, you'd start seeing these changes. And one of the things that I've seen happen, and they were just starting to use covers down there. In some places, there was a lot being used, like in Paraguay, like in Brazil, it was a huge deal. In Argentina, not a lot. This was back a long time ago. I've had some people up since then, and they're not quite doing what they did when we were there, mostly because of political changes. But I've seen that they would talk about these soil, physical changes of soil taking so much time. And when you start using covers religiously, like say every 2 hours, every 3 years, even better if you can do it every year, you can see the soil change in 3 years that would take 10 if you weren't using covers. And not only that, the other big change you see is way better infiltration. That was another big deal that covers help. And that's because of the living root and keeping that soil space opened up. And I'm talking to the choir here. I mean, most of you, I'm sure, know all this stuff. But these were, to me, at the time, remember, a lot of things we were doing, I was considered a crazy person. And matter of fact, my dad told me he had his cousin come up to him and tell him he needed to run me off the farm because I was going to make my dad go broke for how we were farming. It was that unusual. So, because when you're when you're raised in a tillage thing, you start no-tilling, then you start growing cover crops, and everybody wants it black as they can get it. That was the way people wanted it back then. And that's a big deal. When I travel around the country, I'm always amazed about. I know I took a trip through the corn country one time in the spring before they started planting, and this was I'm going to guess it's changed. It's probably been 8-10 years ago, and I'm going to guess I hardly ever saw a field I thought was no-till. I was just blown away. I think it's gotten better. I hope it has. Since I've traveled, I haven't traveled. In the spring, I don't do a lot of traveling because you're usually, busy farming. But I'm sorry, I think I cut off my video somehow looking for that share pictures. You got any questions on why we do something? I try, and we tried to do the same crop a couple of years in a row. That kind of emulates the thing. But the thing that I found that I don't worry about that as much as we used to is when we started using covers, because the cover becomes that crop break. It really helps. And I think that's the reason we're seeing this good luck on soybeans and not using any residual. I mean, that's something we've been wanting to do because my son wants to be able to plant a diverse cover to graze. I don't know too many people that I don't, around here where I live, that almost everybody uses the residual in their soybeans. This has been our third year we've gave that up.
Hey, Keith,
Yes,
this is
sir.
Jeff Hellerick with the NRCS, and I've got a kind of a general question for you. Sounds like you've done a lot of traveling and been all over the world, looking at different cropping systems and the way folks do things. Did you find it, um, was there a lot of applicability from practices in South America that worked well here? Have you generally have you thought that stuff that people are doing in other parts of the country um, work well if you try and bring them over?
In this, yes, in the sense that maybe the crop I couldn't grow, but the biological reason they were doing it was instantly transferred to here. You know, the long-term breaks idea. That's just a biological thing that if you grow something for quite a few years, you can get rid of certain diseases, or you can get. I like my deal about the uh, thistles. I mean, this picture I have of these thistles was unbelievable. You couldn't ride in a pickup across these pastures with your arm out without getting whacked by a thistle. That that really concerned me. So long-term breaks idea works good. The the soil health principles. I remember they were one of the things that they were doing when they was going down there. They weren't using a lot of fertilizer, and we couldn't, like, how can you grow 150, 120, 150 bushel corn putting on 50 pounds of N? And so their theory was, we went to university and talked to a bunch of people and just farmers in general. And their theory was, well, they were pulling up old carbon, deep old carbon. And you know what I'm talking about, the stuff that's deep in the soil. And it wasn't until years later it dawned on me what was really happening was, because they was growing these cover crops, they were replenishing the carbon they used the year before and keeping it in place with their covers instead of wasting it, like and tillage. I'm sorry, it's trying to say, or not having anything growing. So that's where having a cover crop is really important. I think that's the one reason I've been able to cut back on my fertility after thinking about what they done down there and using covers and not seeing. And I'm a slow learner, so it took me a long time to figure that out. But that was a direct, to me, is the biology is the same worldwide. I mean, grow different crops, but why they grow is the same no matter where you go.
Yeah, now the climate there, is that kind of similar to Kansas, the part of South America that you were in, where they've gotten similar rainfall, or is it wetter?
So I was where we spent most time. The first time was west of Buenos Aires. Yeah, they were about in the same rainfall pattern, but hardly ever froze.
Okay.
We were far enough, crazy, I know, north.
Yeah.
It would be like Texas type
Okay.
weather.
So warmer. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Did any of the friends that you made there, did they make trips up to Kansas to see what you're doing here? Or?
Yes, I've had quite a few of them come up here and visit. I've had lots of people come and visit. Yeah, I've had it's fun to travel and see things and see different soils. I didn't know there's so many different kinds of soils in the world in my life. And places they farm. One of the craziest places I was ever been was in Finland, and they were growing corn in Finland, which would have been the same latitude as Anchorage, Alaska. But they were growing it, they was putting plastic down, which was, I couldn't hardly believe that. They were trying to grow corn under crazy conditions.
Yeah.
There were better crops they could grow than that.
Sounds like you have a lot of interesting experiences with agriculture across the world. I do see we have a question from Jude Castens in the chat. I don't know if you can read, if you can see the chat.
Okay, I think I can.
Go ahead. It says, how much precision ag technology do you use for anything on the horizon that interests you? There. Yeah, go ahead, Jude.
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist. How much precision ag tech do you currently use, and where you going with that? And I guess a broader question is, where do you see the importance of managing subfield units or optimizing to that level down the road?
And I've tried every technology, literally, you can try. And I've kind of, the ones I like that seem to make me the most money is auto steer. I don't think I'd ever give that up. I like on our sprayer, we just put on where each nozzle is controlled by the GPS, you know, so each nozzle can shut off. That has helped a lot on overspraying, cutting costs. Have the same kind of technology on my planter, you know, I do that. I've kind of have not had a lot of luck with trying to think what the word would be, where you micromanage your fertility. I've tried it. I haven't seen it. Be honest with you, using the cover crops have done more to make the farms more uniform than anything else I've ever done. Matter of fact, I've tried grid sampling and all that, and I gave that up. I didn't see any benefit to that. I'll be honest with you, I'd like that some of there's. I don't go crazy on fertility ideas, and I'm trying to wean myself off fertility, and I'm trying to wean myself off the use of chemicals. I know I could probably do it even more, but there's kind of a trade-off. I know Rick Clark back east is really doing some really cool stuff with organic stuff and not doing it. But I think it's in some places it works better, or the person's a better operator than I am. It's one of those two things. My son and I seem to think that if you've got good soils, it's a lot and can establish a really good cover crop, it helps, because that's what I see on my better soils. That's where where we see that we can cut back on fertility more, and the need for use of chemicals.
So would you say then, so as you've seen sort of, I'd say maybe, what is it, your average yields going up maybe due to these practices, or is that fair to say, or is it just purely about the profitability side? The yields are kind of what you've always seen, but your management is more efficient.
Okay, I will tell you, my first one is, you're right about the return on investment was better. Yields weren't improving. That was what I saw first. That was the reason I kept no-tilling. I remember I got in a big talk with Terry Castens one time about this, because the data was showing something different. And I told him, well, my yields aren't going down, but I make more money because I'm spending less money. And he kind of like over the years, like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing. So what I'm doing now is not only that, but doing things to improve yields. I'm going to say, just, you know, you don't know exactly because nobody really tells you, but you just kind of listen and you get a feel. Over the years, we seem to average anywhere from 3 to 5 bushel better beans than people around us. And since my brother sold seeds, so I knew they were planting the same seeds I were. They were planting about the same time I was. their farming practice is really different than what I was, and you'd find out, or you'd ask some question and they'd say what they made and like, yeah, I kind of the same. And then I never really will let them know that, yeah, we was just a hair better. Milo and corn, I definitely don't lose any yield. And then I'm coming to find out that I don't have my biological program and my micronutrient programs quite right. Last 2 or 3 years have shown that. Yeah, so it's mostly just cutting back on expenses. To be honest, is where I've made more money. But I don't lose any yield. That's, to me, the part that's most important.
Could you explain, or as much as you want to, you mentioned that IMOS treatment you use.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I'm curious about the costs and how is that implemented in your operation?
Okay. So the cost worked out about $1 an acre last year. And that mostly was the equipment that I bought and buying their, how-to educational system. And so this year I figured it cost me about 30 cents an acre to make my own IMOS. And what I do is I go out and I try to get a little soil from at least 10 different, very diverse sites, mix it all together. And you put ground oats. I know it's one of the things I put with it. There's something else you put with it that comes in this little kind of a kit. And I try to get 10 pounds because that 10 pounds will make 3 batches if you're making the 30-gallon batch. And they also have a system you can do it in 5-gallon batches, just so if you don't have a lot of seed. Because a 30-gallon batch is treat about, 6 ounces to the acres. So you kind of do the math. I think it's 300 and some acres you can do with a batch. That'd be like wheat and soybeans. And you make this stuff, and I spray it on the bean seed, and I spray it on as we're loading it into from the tote. You can spray it through an auger. There's all different ways. Anyways, to get it evenly on the seed and let it set for a few hours. That's the way I try to do it. That's my normal way I do it. And if things go wrong, if it rains or something, once the seed is treated, you got 6 weeks before you have to plant it, because it makes a biofilm on the seed so it stays good. And it's just to help stimulate that bacteria, fungi growth instantly right on the seed.
Do you use it for anything besides beans?
If I get myself together, I'm going to try to spray some on some soybeans, over the top of foliar. And mostly just I'm thinking I'm not going to see any benefit, but I don't know until I try it. And at 30 cents an acre, it's going to cost me more to run my sprayer.
And your standard is the seed treatment usage does that only work with, or is it designed to work with soybeans and facilitate that root process?
It would work with corn. Up there they do all their small grains, their wheat, their barley, their spelt. They grow beans. Anything that basically what it really amounts to is if it's got a seed coating on it, a fungicide, that kills the fungus and bacteria that you spray on it. So my plan this year was to put some in-rows I was planting, but that never worked out. Just 100% due to weather problems. You've got after you make, to me, the thing that's kind of slowing me down on this is it takes 48 hours to make a batch that you can use on the seed or put in row. And I made one batch, it started raining, and I had to dump it out on the ground because it rained for 10 days and the stuff, goes bad. Because it's a living organism and you're trying to keep it live by bubbling water in it. And I tried using some molasses to help feed it to make it go longer. And that helped it stay alive for maybe another 10, 15 hours. And then it starts smelling bad. When it starts smelling bad, when it loses that earthy smell, then, you can't use it anymore. To me, that's the thing I saw up there at Minokan Farms where they had there's something different between the extract that they're getting and what I'm making. Not positive exactly all it's work. I wanted to talk to Jay Fuller about what he was up to, and so somebody asked me questions like I've never got a hold of Jay. So,
Thanks.
But I was pretty dang interested in this.
Yeah,
thing.
and full disclosure, yeah, Terry's my dad, so I'll be Terry Castens, that is. So I'll be seeing him this weekend. So I'm sure I'll talk about this conversation we're having right now.
Yeah, it was that had to be about back 97, 99, somewhere in there, a long time ago. Him and I had this wonderful conversation. We became really good friends over that.
That was back in his extension days.
Yes, sir. That was
Yep.
exactly right.
So, all right, I'll get off here and I know Jennifer and Jeff are probably wondering, man, he's hogging all the airtime. So, thanks again for speaking.
Bet.
Lauren, do you have a question? Looks like you came on camera. We've got just a couple minutes if you're able to ask. You'll need to unmute though, Lauren.
Yeah. How does
All
he
right.
handle Palmer amaranth and red root pigweeds and stuff like that in his soybeans? We just have a terrible time with him.
Okay. Matter of fact, that's a good question. That's one of the things I have noticed since we've started this cover crops and not spraying them out instantly. Is those two have decreased so much that we're actually seeing grass problems worse than that. I can't tell you exactly what's going on, just something's popped up the last year or two. An interesting story on this, what you just asked. When I first started doing covers, I was doing strips, to prove to yourself that it's working or not. And I was actually laying strips out to see if I was seeing a yield loss. And my brother, he hated cover crops when we started. And mostly because people say, you're not going to be able to kill them. And so, and he fought us for 2 years. He wanted to kill them. My son and I wanted to grow as long as we could. He wanted to kill them as soon as he could. And invariably, he would kill them. He'd go out and spray and not tell us. And from that, I discovered you don't want to kill a cover crop and then 2 weeks later try planting into it, because now you have what they call a mess. And that's the reason I just no, don't spray it. The third year we did cover crops, so this would be about 2003. He walks into the shop and he says to us, "You've got to start planting more cover crops on every field we got." And I remember my son and I, we looked at each other, it's like, "What? You've been fighting us for 2 years." And I said to him, what changed your mind? He said, "I'm going to tell you, but there's covers, there's no pigweeds." That's not
We
really
had
true,
that.
Lauren. They are
Yeah, well,
there.
no, we had that happen this year. We couldn't get in and spray, and there were some places, there was some cheat that was terrible. Another places where the weeds, we didn't kill it till after we planted, and they are the only fields where we don't have pigweeds.
Right, yeah.
It's amazing. I just can't believe it. I mean, we have some, but nothing like what we used to. But every place else, when the weeds started growing way, we got to get them sprayed. Don't let them grow.
Yeah.
And this year on 2 farms, we just let them be, and it's the best that we've done.
Right. I think what I think happens, and it looks like to me, is it's not that they don't come up, but they're suppressed so much by the cover that it buys you 2 weeks of being able to spray them and a time that they actually will still die from what you're using, and or don't let them come up. There's the 2 things that goes on. So yeah, you're seeing the
Thank
same
you.
thing I saw. That's
Yep.
the reason we started doing what we're doing. It's like, holy mackerel, it was by an accident. You know, we planted the soybeans, brother was going to spray them. It rained for 4 weeks. He finally gets out there, sprayed them. Anyway, it's like, those were the best beans that field ever had on it. Matter of fact, they were our top yielding beans that year. And so from that, I've slowly, till this year, we did 100% of our bean fields that way.
Thank you.
You bet, Lauren.
Or are there
Yeah.
any? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd say if there's not any more questions, we have gone over our time a little bit. Of course, any follow-ups can be sent to Jeff or me or Dale or anybody, and we can feed them to Keith. But also, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can follow up with Keith in person if you want to attend his field day next Wednesday. So I want to thank Keith for not only speaking today, but for opening up your farm for that and sharing all these experiences. I'll tell everyone else, like I usually do, go ahead and check out the kssoilhealth.org website. Lots of events still going on before we start rolling into harvest time. So if you want to see if there's anything happening in your area, I won't highlight any more of them, but take a look at the calendar and see if there's some
How
other
much longer?
ways you can
It's
come visit with
ending.
others.
Oh,
Jennifer, I'll resend that file and
Yes.
everybody can look at it and it'll make perfect sense to them. The pictures, because they're cool. I mean, it's really neat to see some of this stuff. I brought memories back when I was looking at them yesterday.
Well, that's
Oh,
great. Yeah.
I'm gonna go down like, did I actually push send? Now I'm thinking.
Well, we'll work on getting those shared out to the team so you guys can have that to get that picture to go with what Keith was describing.
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Yes.
And
Thank you
everybody
all
for
for
staying on
joining.
and listening.
Great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks.